All right. Well, I'm Ryan Tebo. I am an assistant area wildlife manager for the Division of Wildlife out of Rochester. Going to be talking today about fall turkey hunting, some basics on the season, history of it, and then I'll get into some of the things I know about finding turkeys and finding places to hunt and hopefully employing some tactics to get yourself a turkey this fall. So, like I mentioned, I'll start with the basics just on wild turkeys in general, some of their biology. They're active on the ground during the day, and a lot of folks don't know that they actually roost in trees overnight. Um, they are capable flyers, but generally they spend most of their time on foot. Um, the few times you'll see them fly is potentially moving from habitat type to habitat type, or fleeing from danger is another time that they'll um, they'll take to the air. But most of the time they are on the ground. Turkeys have excellent eyesight, generally 3 times better than what humans have as 20/20. It can be one of the challenges to getting close to them or hunting them because they can pick things out really, really quickly and easily, even if you think you're really, really covered up. So, um, some basics about the birds themselves. Adult males generally can get up to 25 pounds. I would say they usually range in the 20 to 22 range as an average. One of the distinctive features about them is their breast feathers specifically have a jet black tip iridescence to them, which really makes them shine. Females, while if you don't have a lot of experience differentiating between the two, it can be challenging, but they're usually considerably smaller. Usually they're less than 14 pounds, probably more in the 12-ish range on average. And hopefully in this picture you can maybe see that their breast feathers don't have black tips, but they're brown tipped and just generally drab. The idea behind that is just for more concealment and camouflage. Um, Hen turkeys will nest on the ground during spring, and sometimes they'll be on the ground for up to 28 days incubating a nest, which requires them to stay as camouflaged as possible. Life expectancy is pretty short for turkeys. Females is estimated around 3 years, and males about 4 years. Females are a little bit shorter just because they are on the ground during that nesting season and are subject to depredation by all kinds of mammals and hawks and things like that, whereas the males don't necessarily have to deal with that. Typical habitats for wild turkeys, a good representation of that are interspersed open fields and mature hardwoods. Pine stands and oaks are a very important mature tree species for wild turkeys. So some history of wild turkeys in Minnesota. There wasn't a turkey to be found in the state after 1880. A heavy reintroduction effort began between 1971 and 1973 here in Minnesota. 29 adult wild turkeys were captured in Missouri and brought back up here and released into Houston County. And following that reintroduction effort, or during it, the population did well enough where it was established in Houston County. Birds from that initial 29 were able to be trapped and moved to other parts of Minnesota where they continued to do really well. Well enough where we actually had a first modern hunt in 1978 in the spring. It was limited on how many turkeys could be taken, but it still was the first opportunity for folks to harvest birds not long after being reintroduced. Today, it's estimated there's 70,000 or more turkeys in Minnesota, and we're luckily one of the states that it is believed that their populations are still expanding, unlike some states down south where they're starting to see some declines. And hopefully, that is not something we'll deal with, but it's certainly something that's on our radar. Some history about the Minnesota fall turkey season. The first record of it, 1990. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of history on it, and it's pretty unclear for many years following the implementation of that. What we do know, though, is that it was very limited during that first season where it wasn't statewide and there was only a select number of hunters or number of tags available to harvest birds during those first handful of years. 2004, we start getting a little bit more information. It became statewide across 24 permit areas, or potentially not statewide, but there were 24 designated permit areas where turkeys could be harvested in fall, and there were 2 5-day time periods allowing hunters to hunt. In 2010, 67 permit areas existed in the state, and the fall season expanded to 1 30-day season in all those permit areas, which is kind of the structure we have today. In 2012, those permit areas were actually whittled down quite a bit, making things more easy for hunters, not being limited to a specific area. And in 2012, that's when we began seeing unlimited permits available, where if you wanted to hunt fall turkeys, you could just buy a tag without having to be drawn for that specific opportunity. So how our season is structured now, it is about a month long. The 2023 season dates are September 30th through October 29th. So we are fully in turkey season right now this fall. Generally, the month of October is when our fall turkey season exists and has for the past handful of years. And barring any big changes, I expect that to be the case going forward. One difference about fall turkey season is you can actually harvest a turkey of either sex. Spring, it is specific to males or a turkey that has a beard. But one thing about fall that makes it almost easier, because you can pick and choose depending on what shows up, is that males and females are both available to be harvested. When you buy the license, you are asked to choose a permit area, but one nice thing about it is that you're not actually restricted to hunting that permit area. It's more about tracking where hunters are likely to be hunting. Just to give you an idea of what that map looks like today, you can see Minnesota on the screen here, and those 12 permit areas existing throughout the state. Some are small, some are pretty sizable. Just kind of depends on where you are in the state and where you're looking to hunt. Another season regulation, once you buy that fall turkey license, that license is valid for a number of weapon types. Crossbows can be used, a vertical or compound bow can be used, or the most common is a firearm shotgun. When it comes to shotguns, hunters can only use shotguns that are 10 gauge or smaller. And then another restriction in terms of the ammunition is only shot size number 4 or smaller may be used. I do want to make a couple clarifications here. When we say shotguns 10 gauge or smaller, that doesn't necessarily mesh with the number of the gauge. Smaller shotgun sizes actually increase in number, so 10 gauge, 12 gauge, 20 gauge, those are pretty standard gauges for shotguns, and as I increase there in my description, those would be getting smaller. So smaller number doesn't necessarily mean smaller gauge. The same applies to the shot size. Number 4 is actually the biggest size that could be used, whereas as you continue into 5, 6, 7.5, the number is technically bigger, but the shot size itself is smaller. So what you're looking for with turkey hunting ammunition, here's a couple examples that you'll see on the shelf. The Winchester Longbeard XR, that's a really popular one. You can see on the box, there's a number of things that refer to, what firearm can handle that, and size, velocity, things like that. What you want to pay attention to on either of these is that shot size that's just circled in green. The TSS shot on the left, that is size 7. The Winchester on the right is shot size 5. both of those would fall within the acceptable range of what can be used for turkeys, because that is smaller than size 4. Some quick numbers on what we see harvested in fall and kind of hunter participation, things like that. In fall 2022, we saw 1,285 turkeys harvested, and the split between males and females was pretty close to even, 53% females, 47% males. The success rate for hunters in 2022 was 14.3%. That was pretty darn close to our long-term average of 14.1% hunter success during the fall season. About 9,000 licensed fall turkey hunters took the field in 2022. One comparison I want to make is that is far less than what we see taking to the field during the spring hunt. 53,574 folks purchased spring turkey license in 2023. So if you have any interest in fall turkey hunting, it's a really good opportunity to pursue the birds without a lot of competition. So I want to get into some of the gear and other things you need to get started. One of the nice things about just turkey hunting in general is that in comparison to a lot of other hunting seasons, it takes far less to get involved in terms of things you need to purchase, gear, firearms, things like that. So a couple of the important things to start with for gear is a legal weapon type. Most of the time people are going to choose a shotgun. So that is kind of what I have highlighted here. So if you're going to take a shotgun out in the field, you're going to want to have the proper ammunition. Boots and camouflage clothing. The camouflage will be very important. The more covered up you can be in camouflage, the better. Like I mentioned earlier, turkey's eyesight is incredible, and they will pick you out if you're not covered up good. Sometimes camouflage itself isn't even enough, and trying to use your surroundings, brush, things like that are maybe what needed to kind of get you over the hump to hide. So some other things that I think are important for having with you in turkey hunting: binoculars, and if you feel comfortable enough, a turkey call. Can be very efficient to use a turkey call in fall, just like it is in spring. Of course, the fall turkey hunting license, I will get into that a little bit more coming up here. Do make sure it's signed once you purchase it. And then some optional things, a backpack or a pack to have on your belt. Turkey decoys can be a really nice option depending on if you feel comfortable or not taking those with. Some folks like to use some sort of blind, pop-up blind that you can sit in. Some folks like to just sit against a tree. If you do that option, having some sort of seat pad is always nice. And then a knife is always a good option as well. The license requirements for fall, it's pretty simple. You just need a resident fall turkey hunting license. Current cost is $26 for adults. Resident youth fall turkey hunting license is only $5 for ages 13 to 17. And then a resident youth hunter 12 and under, it is free. So it could be a cool opportunity for those younger folks to get involved with pretty limited cost, and there actually is no age restriction on turkey hunting for when kids can actually get started. So if they're 6 or 7 and are proficient with the firearm that they plan to use, they can certainly go out there and try to harvest themselves a turkey with the proper guidance. Finally, you need a place to hunt, and there are a lot of good places on our public land here in Minnesota. We are lucky to have a really large public land base that includes wildlife management areas, state forest areas, aquatic management areas, and numerous other sites that could be open county forests, walk-in access areas that are found throughout the state. One thing I do want to mention for public land, because this is new and might be a little bit of a surprise to folks, we did put into statute a blaze orange requirement for these pop-up style blinds. A person in a fabric or synthetic ground blind on public land must have a blaze orange safety covering on top of the blind that is visible from all directions, or a patch made of blaze orange material that is at least 144 square inches on each side of the blind. And this regulation now applies year-round on all public land. Basically, this is what it looks like. The pop-up blind on the left kind of has that 12 by 12 patch that is on all four sides. Or another option you can purchase from a lot of these companies is just that total kind of top cover that is blaze orange, which would certainly be more than what is required, but is not necessarily a bad thing. So like I mentioned, public land is potentially a great place to look if you don't have access to private land. However, private land may be an option for you. Do you know anyone with land willing to let you hunt? Or are you willing to do some door knocking or some cold calling? Maybe there's some properties that you've been seeing turkeys on, you know somebody, has that under private ownership, but they may be open to allowing fall turkey hunting. I have found in my experience that getting access to private land for turkey hunting is oftentimes a lot easier than some other species like deer that can be pretty challenging, or the property already has people hunting it for that purpose. So if you're willing to do that kind of thing, I certainly would say go for it. Just make sure, when dealing with private landowners, you are, courteous and respectful, and don't be afraid to get a no or a handful of no's along the way. When it comes to figuring out where to hunt, the number one key to success, no matter what hunting tactic you decide to use, is scouting. Without finding the birds, you're going to have no luck. One of the best places to start with the technology we have today is virtual scouting. And the Minnesota DNR actually has a really nice tool called the Recreation Compass that can help identify public lands specifically in the state that may be in your area of interest. Here's a screenshot of kind of what it looks like when you get started. One of the really nice things about when you bring it up in this base map form is basically all of the properties that you can see highlighted in green, yellow, those colors, those are generally all open parcels of land that could be used for public hunting. So as an example, here I circled, a part of the southeast that maybe I'm interested in. And you can zoom in, and a lot of these will actually have the names linked to them. You can click on a parcel, and depending on what you click on, you may get more information. As an example, here in the screenshot, I have clicked on Choice Wildlife Management Area. It brings up a little box here, and then at the top, if you click on the name, that will bring you to the website specifically for Choice WMA that will give you more information on that specific unit, parking areas, things like that. All that can be helpful for kind of doing the first step in deciding if it's an area you want to check out. There are also some really great third-party apps for virtual scouting. Onyx Hunt is a very popular one used by folks. This is the one I personally use as well. The functions of it are seemingly never ending, dropping pins on things of interest. You can track your movements, you can draw polygons. It gives you private ownership data layers where you can identify who the landowners are if you're looking to get some access on private land. And then also it highlights all of the state land as well. These do come with a cost generally, so you'd have to keep that in mind. It's pretty reasonable, but compared to the Recreation Compass, which we offer for free through DNR, these third-party apps are going to cost you a little bit of money. The other scouting technique that you're obviously going to want to employ is on the ground. You can virtually scout as much as possible, but you're going to have to actually check out these sites to see if there's any sign of turkeys even on them. There's oftentimes spots that look really good from the air, and then when you get there, maybe it doesn't look quite as good as what you're hoping. So once you kind of get that virtual step done, if that's an option you want to take, certainly get outside and take a look at these properties you're interested in, and see if you can locate turkeys or locate sign. And kind of going back to figuring out exactly where you want to hunt, try to target land parcels that have interspersed mature timber. Oaks are oftentimes the best. Pine stands can be important as well. But find these that are kind of interspersed with agricultural fields. Especially in fall, turkeys are very food focused, and fields that are harvested are great food sources that they will consistently keep coming back to. One thing that may make it a little more challenging in fall is just finding the turkeys to begin with. They do begin flocking up in fall, so they will be in larger groups, but it's likely they're not going to be as spread out. A lot of times in spring, during the breeding season, these birds can be spread out all over the place, and I've found times where it seems like everywhere I go there's turkeys, and that may very well not be the case in fall. So scouting to make sure you can find them just to begin with is going to be very important. But once you find them, they're oftentimes very patternable in fall, and they'll kind of stick to a very consistent way of going about their day that can be helpful for trying to hunt them. So clues you want to kind of key in on when searching for birds, like I mentioned, agricultural fields are a very important place for them to forage. That's not the only place they'll want to forage, but when looking around at these areas that might be of interest, first look for tracks. You can find them oftentimes on the edge of these agricultural fields, sometimes in water sources, and they're going to indicate the direction of travel. So when you find these tracks, kind of use that to your advantage to figure out, where they're going from there. Some other thing you can look for are their droppings. In areas that they utilize heavily, you should be able to find this. You can actually even tell between males and females based on the droppings. Males will have kind of a longer linear J shape to them, and hens kind of have a squiggle to them at the end. So you can actually even figure out which birds you're potentially finding their areas. And one thing I didn't mention about them flocking up in fall is a lot of times they will stay separated, where the males will be in a flock themselves and then the females will be in a separate flock, where we oftentimes don't see them traveling together as one big group. If you're looking in forested areas, one really major sign of turkeys being in the area is scratching in the leaves. Sometimes it's not terribly apparent, but if you start seeing kind of odd bare spots in the leaves, this very well could be turkeys that are pulling leaves away and exposing bare ground looking for food. Some of these areas look crazy at just how torn up they are, with huge mounds of leaves pretty much everywhere you look, and then the bare spots. And if you find something like that, you're probably looking in the right area. Another sign of turkeys hanging around, just feathers laying around. This first feather that I have here on the screen, that is one of their wing feathers. And when I was younger, I used to think those were hawk feathers, and I imagine that other folks will confuse that for a hawk feather as well. But those are indeed turkey feathers. So look for kind of that white and dark barring alternating on feathers if you find them. And then also these tail feathers could be something you'll find as well, which may be a little bit more familiar to folks. Another thing to clue in on are roost locations. Like I said earlier, turkeys spend their nights in trees, and if you're able to find where they are spending their nights, you can potentially figure out exactly what they're going to do as soon as they wake up in the morning. These roost trees usually are large mature trees such as oaks with sturdy horizontal branches. White pines are oftentimes a mature tree that they'll choose for roosting overnight. One thing to help you identify these kind of trees without possibly actually being there to see them in the tree is finding droppings around the bases of trees. Can help indicate where they're hanging out at night. One really nice thing about finding a roost location is that they're very vocal at dawn and dusk. And this can actually be one way to find them actually on the roost if you don't know where it is if you're out in the field early in the day or late in the day when they are going up. They may give themselves away just by how vocal they are once they're on the tree limb there. Um, and then one nice thing, if you are able to find a roost location, is it will give you a starting point to pin down their movements right away in the morning. If you're lucky enough, you might even be able to get one right away if you figure out exactly where they're flying down. So some of the fall tactics that I want to go through, well, there's two of them, and the first is just sit and wait. And this one is basically the same as hunting turkeys in spring, just probably with a little less aggressiveness for the male birds. But still, in fall, this requires finding consistent areas of use. You're going to need to do that scouting, figure out where the turkeys are using, whether it be a forested area right off the roost, or maybe midday they're consistently going into a picked cornfield. You're going to have to know exactly what they're doing so you can set up appropriately and hopefully have one in range. Once you find these areas, you're going to want to get there early, set up with plenty of cover. If it's a morning hunt, you're going to want to get there in the dark. If it's a field that you've been seeing them show up at noon every day, you're probably going to want to be there a good hour or 2 hours before that, just in the event that they hang out nearby and don't come out into the field that quickly. One thing too is don't be afraid to call. When I started getting into fall turkey hunting, this method wasn't one that I thought would work, and a lot of other folks seemed to think that this was more meant for spring hunting turkeys, but you can oftentimes get the same responses to calling in fall than you do in spring. And specifically with the females, they can be especially territorial during fall. So hearing live turkeys calling and calling back more aggressively can oftentimes get them to want to come investigate and try to see who is trying to stomp on their territory in a sense. So another thing too, if one feels comfortable, is that decoys can be really effective. Giving them that visual that they can see across a field can, one, help bring them in, and two, potentially help them key in on the decoy and instead of seeing you if you're off to the side or not as concealed as well as you would have hoped. So kind of a quick example of what a sit and wait technique would be. So say this is a property you have access to, a couple really nice fields on the property with some interspersed mature timber. You spent a couple evenings out here and found that the turkeys are roosting north of the fields, kind of in this wooded draw. And numerous times you've seen them come on out to the corner of this field. So next day, get out there nice and early. Get out there when it's dark, where they're definitely not going to see you, because keep in mind they're going to be up in trees. So their vantage point is going to be pretty good if you're walking in during daylight hours. They're going to see you coming. So make your approach using cover if you can, and also using darkness at your advantage if it's right away in the morning. And then, yeah, set up, where you expect them to come out. So, once daybreak happens, ideally what happens is they follow that same exact pattern, come out the corner of the field there, and hopefully if you're set up appropriately, you'll get your shot. Some quick examples of concealment. This is a pretty popular option, these pop-up blinds. They're about as good as you can get for making sure you stay hidden. You'd think that a bird with really good eyesight would pick that out and be alarmed by it, but they don't seem to have many cares about these large pop-up blinds. One of the downsides to them is they're pretty large to carry with you in the field. So one of my favorite options is one of these kind of packable, um, like fabric type blinds. They just push in. They've got some stakes that go throughout, and you can push them in the ground and give yourself a little extra concealment. But there's nothing wrong with just finding some good tree cover at your back and setting up like this too. The second fall tactic I want to talk about is what I'm going to call breaking up the flock. And this one is certainly a more mobile style of turkey hunting. You can put on a bunch of boot miles trying to do this. Basically, the idea is walk around and find a flock of turkeys and scare the daylights out of them in hopes that they are going to take off in different directions. And the idea is when you scare them in different directions, you're hoping they're going to want to come back to regroup. So if you are able to scare them in those different directions where you can kind of find a spot in the middle of where they all fled from, or kind of near where you initially saw them, start there and give it some time. Be patient, 5-10 minutes. Just listen, see if you start hearing any calling. If done right and the turkeys are broken up in a spaced out enough manner, they should start calling to find one another. And the biggest recommendation here is listen, and then based on what you hear, imitate them. Some calls you might hear, what's considered a key call. It's not a very well-known call for turkeys, but basically this is kind of their assembly call, that when a bird is lost or searching for the rest of their flock, they will send out a series of high-pitched whistles that kind of sound like the name. Oftentimes those are kind of interspersed between the normal yelp turkey calls that folks are more familiar with, or they'll kind of do a series of yelps with keys mixed in. Also, they may just yelp, and don't hesitate to just use those calls if that's what you feel comfortable using to try to get them to come back in. Um, it's possible that you may not hear them start calling. And if you've given it a fair amount of time and you haven't heard them, don't be afraid to be the first to start calling. Sometimes that's what it'll take to get them to hear you and elicit that response to get them to start coming back. If you hear them or start seeing them come back, they may be coming back from numerous directions and kind of unexpectedly. So this method is potentially a little bit more nerve-wracking because you're not exactly sure what's going to happen, given that you just scared them. But it can be pretty fun as well. So here's kind of another demonstration on what this might look like. The hunter's starting up in the top portion and just going for a walk, walking the edge of this field, and once they get to this power line cut, they can see some turkeys using this triangle field. As long as they don't catch you before you catch them, you can kind of make a plan and try to employ this method once you get close enough to make a move. So at this point, what you'd want to do is run at them, yell, scream, try to be as scary as possible, basically, where you're going to bust those birds in numerous locations where they're not all going to be together once they flee, and they're going to want to hopefully regroup shortly after you scare them. So in a scenario like this, if the birds move off in numerous directions, you're going to want to pick a point that maybe is kind of in the middle of where they had all fled from, or the starting point of where you'd seen them, and sit and listen. If you hear them start to call, start imitating them. Oftentimes that imitation fires them up and gets them to come in quickly. The other option is, if you don't hear them, don't hesitate to start your own calling sequence and hope that they respond. And the idea is that, once they start hearing those calls, all of them will start coming back to regroup. And at that point, hopefully you'll get your shot. So hopefully I've made a reasonable case here for you wanting to try turkey hunting, but a couple other things that maybe push you over the edge. There's different options for how you want to hunt. Um, do you like being mobile on your feet, or are you a person that likes to be still and just sit for hours on end? It's totally up to you. You can make the hunt fit your style best you can, or you can try both. You can be mobile and you can sit for a while. Um, Turkey hunting in fall is just generally fairly laid back. It's a really nice opportunity for new hunters or youth hunters to get in the field, try something new without a lot of pressure, or generally not a lot of competition for spots. Um, October is just a beautiful time to be in the woods too. It's hard to beat when the weather starts cooling down a little bit. No bugs, or you're also not freezing to death. And there's also a lot of other wildlife to be seen at this time if you're not seeing turkeys. Um, One of my final recommendations, and this is something I've done numerous times in the past, is especially those folks who may already pursue deer with an archery license in fall. Heck, put a fall turkey license in your pocket. I've had numerous times where I've been archery deer hunting and a flock of turkeys comes by, and had I just had that tag in my pocket, I I could have potentially had a turkey. So it it could be a nice option for you if you want to pair that fall turkey license with an already purchased deer license, and then if you get a chance and one comes by, you'll have that opportunity. Um, with that, I guess I will open it up to any comments or questions on anything I covered, and I will certainly do my best to answer anything that comes up.
Oh, great job, Ryan. A lot of fantastic information. I really appreciate you being with us today and all the great information you shared. Just a reminder to folks that Benji did put a couple of links in the chat. So if you want to see some of those and follow up with them, those are great resources. And then just a reminder too, we are ready to take some more questions. We do have a couple of really good ones, Matt, so I'll jump into that. But if anyone else has any questions they'd like to suggest or ask, put those in the Q&A and we can see what we can get to. The first question, Matt, was about shot size and loads and stuff, and it's kind of a question I had too, but how much difference is there between a pheasant shell and a turkey shell, both with number 5 shot?
That is a really good question, and it may depend on the type of shot, whether it be lead or if it's this tungsten TSS. Um, I don't know offhand, and frankly, it's something that is still a confusion when you're switching between like lead or steel, tungsten, things like that. Um, what I can tell you is that I would just try to look it up on the internet because I just don't know offhand. Um,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I'm not an ammo expert either, but we do have our shooting specialists, I think, here, and maybe Benji and Craig, if one of you want to jump on and address the whole difference between some of these loads and weight, or the size and stuff like that, that would be great if you have any thoughts on that.
Waiting for Craig to jump in there, but
Yeah,
there he is.
And we see all these heavy shot stuff, and I guess I would stress that you certainly can get turkeys without any without having to buy those also, right? I mean, and maybe you talk a little bit about shot selection and where you're shooting a turkey too. And Craig, want to jump in on this?
Your pheasant loads would probably be 1.25 ounces, and your turkey loads would probably be a little bit heavier, have a little more powder behind them.
And what's the advantage of that? I mean, it's the more impact on.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. You got more BBs per ounce.
Bigger birds, so you have a little bit more
right.
power, right?
And you're aiming for the wattle area on the neck. You're not aiming for the head because your shot pattern is going to rise a little bit.
Okay.
And the TSS shot out there now, I've seen it like 9 shot for turkey loads in a 410, and the guys swear by that as a turkey getting gun. So less recoil, youth could use it, or adult could shoot it. But that's also going to be better for the environment because it's tungsten and not lead.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of switching over to a pheasant load, just spend a little money and get the TSS tungsten shot.
And with
So
turkeys,
that'd be the
you
difference.
are going to be shooting at close range, hopefully in a lot of cases too. So the closer you are, you can get by with some of the lighter loads, right?
Right, right.
Something to just try and experiment and see what works for you, I guess.
Yep.
Thanks, Craig.
No problem.
We had Matt also ask a question about hunting turkeys in Minneapolis. We've got turkeys all over the place in the metro area, even downtown. Obviously, cities have restrictions, but I did respond to that about city ordinances on use of firearms. But what I didn't add in my answer is that there are many more of our urban and suburban cities that are actually larger in size with less density, and they oftentimes will allow archery hunts. So it's something, and even I know one near where I used to live in ex-urban St. Paul actually allowed shotgun hunting. So check with your city. They all have different ordinances, but especially in those more suburban areas, you might still be able to hunt those turkeys, as long as you get permission, obviously, to be on private property and all the other rules related to shooting near buildings and stuff. But there's some options potentially. Christopher asked, why is the license cost so high, unlike small games cost, where you can harvest numerous kinds of animals for the same price? And you, of course, sometimes have to get stamps. So I guess I think part of the question is, why don't we have a turkey stamp, or why do we have different licensing? And obviously, you have to get a separate, more expensive license.
That's a great question. And I don't know that I necessarily have an answer as to why that differs. In my experience, that's just kind of the way it's always been, and mostly other states are the same. I've hunted turkeys in a couple different states, and they have a turkey-specific license that is generally in the same ballpark. It may just have to do with the size of the game itself, and limits being where it's not like waterfowl or small game where you can harvest numerous critters, where it's kind of a novel one time, like this is what you're gonna hunt for, in the case of fall, 30 days. So I'm not sure if that really gets to the root of it, but those are kind of my inklings on it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess, I don't know the answer to that either, but I would guess you're on the right track there with the size of the game. And as you pointed out, 30 days, that's a lot of entertainment for one, what would you say, it was $27 license, right? So
Yeah.
you can go out multiple times, unlike some of our other species. So did you want to weigh in on that, Benji?
I did want to point out we have 5 stamps in Minnesota, and the stamps are, through legislation, the money for those stamps are directed towards habitat improvement for those species. So, like our trout stamp, salmon stamp, waterfowl, pheasant, walleye, and turkey, right? So, all those stamps are kind of that money goes back to habitat and habitat improvement. And we got to think it wasn't that long ago we didn't have turkeys in the state of Minnesota, so all that money from those turkey stamps has done its job. It's done a great job. So.
Now, turkey stamps are not required, correct? Is that correct? But we do offer the opportunity to buy one in the state.
Okay, we offer an opportunity to buy
We
one.
have a state contest. So all of that money, as you said, helps support our wildlife management of turkeys. So it helps. Paul asked, if I'm interested in shooting a tom this fall, should I put out only a tom decoy, or are there other decoys that you could use?
I would think that a tom decoy would likely be your best bet if you specifically want to get a tom to respond to that. However, I would not recommend a very aggressive pose. A lot of the turkey decoys on the market are geared towards spring turkey hunting, and you'll get tom decoys like full fan, or what they consider like half strut, quarter strut, things like that, which is a very specific spring behavior. Not that turkeys don't do that in fall, but if possible, I would I would try to find one that is on the less aggressive side, if possible, and I think that could still be very, very effective if you want to specifically try to get a tom. So, like I think I mentioned in the presentation, you know, yes, turkeys are focused on food this time of the year, but there still is a hierarchy within those flocks, and they will show aggression as need be to make sure that, you know, the dominant bird stays dominant, things like that, and they're just curious in general. So using those decoys certainly could get that tom to come right in as you would hope.
Yeah, and someone who my daughters and I actually have been lucky enough to fortunate to harvest a couple of turkeys in the fall. As you talked about it, it really is so important to know the patterning and to be able to scout. Where I'm again very fortunate to have some private property in my family that we're able to hunt on, and to be out there a lot and see them and know where they're going. It really made a huge difference to be able to get those turkeys. But the one tom I did get, we did actually have a hen decoy out, and they did respond to it. I mean, we were sitting in the right location on the edge of a flute plot, but I think it
Sure.
helps definitely to have that
Sure.
turkey out there, that decoy. So, um, Mark asked, can a 22 rifle be used? And I was kind of wondering if you, and maybe we have to bring Craig back in on this, but why isn't rifles allowed for turkey hunting?
I don't know if I would know that offhand. Maybe Craig has some insight on that, because I know there are states that do allow it. I believe South Dakota is one, but I'm not sure what the basis for allowing it or not allowing it is.
Craig, any thoughts on that? If you do, can pop back in. I mean, we can guess there's some safety concerns potentially here.
Certainly.
Obviously, a rifle shell is going to go, a load is going to go a lot farther, so they're, a lot safer to be hunting with shotguns. But any thoughts, Craig?
So you guys asked the question so quick, I wasn't able to text a friend, but let me do that and I'll get back
Okay.
to you guys with an answer on that if I can, okay?
Okay, thank you. Carol's wondering if there's a mobile version of the Rec Compass.
There is. It's not an app per se, but if you look, like, go to Google and type in MNDNR Recreation Compass, there is an option that says Mobile Recreation Compass, and it just functions better from a mobile phone. It's not anything you download like an app, like I mentioned, but I would recommend using that if it's a phone. Otherwise, just the basic Recreation Compass is pretty functional on a computer screen. So you kind of have the option to bounce between the two depending on where you want to be looking at it.
Okay, great. And Douglas is wondering, do turkeys have a strong sense of smell?
They do not, and be thankful of that, because if they had a strong sense of smell, or really any sense of smell in general, they'd be really, really hard to go hunt, given their eyesight already is really challenging to beat.
Yeah. Okay, Eric asked, is a plug required for turkey hunting in Minnesota?
It is not. Turkeys are one of the species that a plug would not be not be needed in a firearm. So
Pretty much plugs are only required in Minnesota for waterfowl hunting, if I got that right. Other small game and, pheasants, etc., you do not need a plug.
yep.
Jeffrey is wondering, do you know if there's a difference in turkey behaviors in the northern part of the state, like Red River Valley, or versus the turkeys in southern Minnesota?
I don't know of anything like that offhand, other than possible just behaviors tied to their habitat use. Um, turkeys down in the southeast here have a lot of agriculture at their disposal, and likely just different forest types versus up north. So just their uses of those habitat types and what they favor for like foraging or food sources may be the biggest difference. But general behavior, I don't think I don't think there's anything that would really be different between those groups of birds.
I know you hunt primarily in southeast, and I'm in west central Minnesota, actually on the transition to prairie. And actually, on our property, we have 55 acres of prairie and wetlands, and they do, but we have 10 acres of hardwood, and there's most of the time that's where they are, and certainly they roost in the trees. But they do spend time on the prairie for sure.
Oh yeah.
And along the wetlands, I've seen them, next to and in fact, I know they nest primarily out in the prairie in our area, in the near the wetland, denser grass cover. So,
Yep.
but yeah, I think
Those grassland or like shrubland type habitats are really important for nesting cover in spring. In fall, I imagine they'll use it to some extent, but probably not to that same degree.
All right, the next question is from Danny. Are there any concerns that turkeys will ingest lead shot and get lead poisoning?
Not really that I'm aware of. I would just say, in general, it would be a good practice if it makes sense for you, your budget, and if your firearm patterns well with non-toxic shot, to go that route, just because it is better for the environment, and then you do limit any possibility of that. There's not any worry from my perspective about turkeys, but there's a lot of other critters that could come into contact with that too if that hits the ground. And my guess is as we continue into the future here that the push for non-toxic shot will become more and more. So I don't think it's a bad idea to start going that route anyway. Personally, like I still have a box of Winchester lead turkey loads that I will use up, but after those are gone, I plan to make the switch. And then the other nice thing about that too is, there's some pieces of public land currently that has that restriction in place where you have to have non-toxic shot. So if you just start with it from the beginning, you're clear to go wherever. One example is waterfowl production areas, where I have found some turkeys before, but I couldn't hunt it because the loads that I had were lead based, and that was a restricted use on those properties.
Yeah, really good points. And turkeys have a crop, right? Like most birds do. So they are ingesting small pieces of gravel, rock, and which could they could ingest BBs and get in their crop and give them lead poisoning. It could happen. Now it's more spread out across the woods and the prairie, whatever, than it is where it's concentrated in wetlands where people have in the past used to waterfowl hunt. So, but it is still a potential issue for turkeys, definitely.
Sure.
We kind of talked about this a little bit, but Matt asked about aiming and shooting at turkey, and as Craig pointed out, aiming at the neck, is that pretty much the standard of the wattle because of the shot component and getting the head or other. They're more vulnerable, right? Because the feathers can protect their them from getting get shots and stuff, right, on their body. He did also ask about cleaning turkey. Any tips on cleaning turkeys?
So
Or Craig, you want to weigh in on the shot, making your shot and where you're aiming and stuff?
right, the feathers they're not bulletproof or armor, but
No.
they can dispel some of the BBs and maybe not penetrate deep enough to get into the vitals of a turkey. That's why we aim for the neck. We're trying to break that vertebrae in the neck or penetrate the skull and get into the brain cavity, which is going to cause instantaneous. So yeah, just aim for that wattle. Your shot can go a little bit high and still engage the brain head area, or you can take out the vertebrae in the neck. As far as dressing a turkey, it's not undifferent than dressing a grouse. You can feel the edge of the breast and make an incision around there, pull everything out to the rear, and dress your bird just like you would a grouse or a duck or what have you.
Clean
I think you'd want to,
clean out the gut cavity,
right,
and then as far as
the lungs, the heart.
for the meat, I mean, some folks I know fillet out and take out the breast meat is an easy way to clean them, but I've done both. You know, also pluck them actually, and cook them
Ooh.
whole, just like you would a turkey from the store. So you can prepare them that way, but the meat is tougher on the other parts of the body, the legs in particular. But
I usually keep the legs and thighs. Keep the legs and thighs for turkey soup. You know, the back of the turkey, I've used that for just making the stock. And then cubing up the breast, filleting it off, cubing it up. I've done turkey a la king, which was a big hit with everybody. I don't think turkeys have the fat content that domesticated birds have. That's why they tend to dry out in the oven. So you can do them that way. You just got to be really careful not to dry out your bird. And I usually stuff the cavity with apples, and that tends to keep the bird a little bit moisture if you want to do that.
Thanks. I would let you jump in on that, Ryan, but we have another question for you. Are there certain types of food plots that would attract turkeys to my property and keep them there?
I would say any kind of standard, like standard agricultural practice is what they're used to and what you see them using a lot. Corn, I don't think you can go wrong with corn. I would think they may eat soybeans, but I'd probably choose corn over that. I'm sure there are other food sources that could be used, but it just seems kind of like a standard one to go for.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, the other part though, like they have to be able to get to it. So you know, a lot of times we see turkeys using harvested cornfields. So if it's a food plot that stays standing, you may see them not use it as much if you know the corn's all stuck on the cobs, but they are certainly capable of just knocking the whole stalk over to get to it. So
and they can jump really well too. I know that they really like grapes also. We have a vineyard.
Oh yeah, okay, interesting.
Well, we are running out of time, so we'll wrap up, I think, with that last question. Thank you so much for all the great information, Ryan. It was really great to have you here. And I do want to mention that we have, as we said earlier, this is recorded. So please share that. Go to mndnr.gov/discover, and you can see the recording in a few days. And link to other recordings. As I mentioned earlier, we have a really good video that we did, I think, last year, the year before, on turkey calling. So if you really want to dig into calling turkeys and how to do that, there's a great video there. And then also I want to mention next week we have a great program on fishing in the fall. It is a wonderful time. This is the time right now to get out there and catch some really nice big fish at this time of the year. So a couple of our fisheries experts will be our regional managers or area managers that do a lot of fishing will be joining us to talk about all kinds of fish that you can catch in the fall.
I did hear back on the 22 issue.
Oh, yes.
So they cannot be used, only shotguns or muzzleloading shotguns with 4-shot. And I asked if it was a safety concern. They said yes. So
okay,
there you go.
Good. Thanks, Craig.
Yep.
All right. See you all next week. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week. Get outside. It's a beautiful time. Do that.